Hello, and welcome back to the Tesma YouTube channel. I'm David, and if you couldn't tell from the thumbnail or from the objects placed in front of me, today's video is about Chasen. First, I'll talk about what a Chasen is and go over a little bit about how they're made. Then I'll take you through some of the varieties of Chasen that exist. And lastly, I'll teach you how to open and prepare a brand new Chasen for use. Chasen roughly translates to tea whisk. Whisk is a rough translation, but we'll go with it because it makes sense in English. No one's quite sure when the first Chasen was invented, but it was probably sometime during the Song dynasty in China in the 8 to 1200s. They probably looked a little different, but someone back then had a piece of bamboo cut into little tiny pieces and used it to whisk tea. After the practice of drinking powdered and whisked tea was brought back from Song dynasty China to Japan in roughly the 1100s by various Buddhist monks, notably Eisai, tea culture in Japan began to take on its own form and eventually evolved into what we now know as the Japanese tea ceremony, or cha-no-yu, or sado. In the 1400s, one of the most famous chajin of all time, Murata Juko, had commissioned a bamboo craftsman in the village of Takayama in Nara Prefecture to create chasen. These chasen were so good that they were presented to the emperor, and to this day, Takayama village in Nara Prefecture is the home of Japanese chasen. We're not quite sure what chasen of this time looked like, but they probably had already developed the division between the outer and inner tines, although they might have been more straight-tined rather than the curved shape that was more popular today. From this point on, the chasen has undergone very few alterations, just subtle variations in shape and thickness of tines, depending on the individual chajin's preference or the preference of the school of tea that they practice. But for the most part, the anatomy of a chasen is more or less the same. So let's take this one for example. It's made of a single piece of bamboo that is split into multiple tines. These tines are then split into an outer ring of tines and an inner ring of tines, and these are kept separate by this band of weaving. The bottom piece of the bamboo is kept unsplit, and that's the part that you hold to whisk with. Each chasen starts its life out as a piece of bamboo growing on a mountain in Nara Prefecture. It's up to the craftsman to go through the bamboo forest and select the right type of bamboo. Today, most chasen come in two main varieties of bamboo. We have shiratake, meaning white bamboo, and shichiku, or kurotake, meaning purple bamboo or black bamboo. The main difference for these when it comes to the user experience is primarily cosmetic. After the piece of bamboo has been chosen and harvested, it is taken to the craftsman's villa where it is left to dry for 2 to 3 years. It takes a long time for bamboo to dry naturally. In other places, such as China and Korea, where chasen are made more cheaply and quickly, this drying is aided chemically. One issue with chemically aided drying is that because of how fast the bamboo dries, it's easier for it to crack and splinter. After the bamboo has been carefully dried, it is cut to length. The length is noted by the node here. It has to be a certain distance below the node to have a good enough handle, and a certain distance above the node to have enough space for the tines. After the outer skin has been taken off the upper portion of the tines, the craftsman will take a knife and split it into 16 even segments. The inner pith of the bamboo, as you can see the white part here, is taken out and separated from the skin and thrown away. Now there's just the outer layer of bamboo left. The craftsman will take each segment and cut it down into whatever number of tines is desired. From here on out, each tine is shaved to be even thinner towards the tip than it is at the base. So if you have a nice Japanese chasen, you can feel the thickness of the tine at the base versus the thickness of the tine at the top, and you can see it's much thinner and more flexible. The faces of each tine are chamfered one by one. If they were left square, then matcha would stick more readily to them when whisking, so the craftsman will chamfer each tine individually. After this, the craftsman, or the craftsman's wife in many cases, will take a black cord and weave it in and out, separating the inside from the outside. Right at the very end, the final shape must be decided. The craftsman will take a knife and curl the tips or keep them straighter. So as you can tell, creating a chasen is a very labor-intensive and high-skilled process, and there are only about a dozen or so families left in Japan who can produce them, and all of them live in the small town of Takayama in Nara Prefecture. Many of these families are at their 18th, 19th, or even 25th generation, and have been continuing and preserving their families' legacies, traditions, and crafts. Because these craftsmen can't quite keep up with the demand of overseas matcha drinkers, many places outside of Japan have begun making chasen, namely China and Korea and also Thailand. While Chasen from these regions are certainly usable and are a great way to get into matcha, they're just not quite as good as the ones from Takayama. Let's take a quick look at some of the different types that you can find. Apart from the color of the bamboo from which they're made, Chasen are usually classified by two other features: the number of tines that they have and the way that these tines are shaped. So first let's look at the number. Chasen are usually sold by the number of tines that they have. Now this number is not an accurate count, but is more of a rough idea of how many tines they have. There's usually 6 different tiers of Chasen tine count. There is 120 tines, 100 tines, 80 tines, Kazuho, Shu-araho, and O-araho. As the name would suggest, 120, 180 have approximately that number of tines, although in reality that might not actually add up. The name really refers to the width of the bamboo. This is an 80 tine Chasen, this one in particular from China. You see that the bamboo is much wider than this Kazuho Chasen from Japan. Kazuho, which means a number of tines, literally, is sort of the catch-all term for these middle-of-the-road Chasen, which are the standard ones that we recommend starting with. The slightly smaller handle is more ergonomic to hold than these wider ones. The number of tines is perfect for whisking usucha, or the frothy matcha you're used to seeing. If you want to know how to whisk usucha, check out our video over there. This Chasen is also very good at making a single serving of koicha, or thick tea, which makes it a very good all-round starter Chasen. This is a chu-araho, or sort of medium thick tine. These tines are slightly sturdier and wider than the Kazuo, and these are particularly designed for kneading koicha. However, if you're going to get a koicha whisk, why not go all out and opt for an o-araho, or big rough tine, or big coarse tine. This one's seen quite a lot of use, but you can tell that these tines are much, much thicker than that of the Kazuo. The thick, sturdy tines are really good for kneading large servings of koicha for like 3 or more people, as they can stand up to being scraped against the side of the bowl, which is something that you need to do when kneading koicha. However, they're not very good at making usucha, as the tines simply aren't fine enough to make a good foam. As I mentioned earlier, the second way that Chasen are defined is by their shape, and there are technically 2 types of Kazuo. These are both Kazuo Chasen because they have the same number of tines. However, you can clearly see that there is a difference between these two, other than the color of the bamboo, and that is the shape of the tines. This shape, with a gentle curve to straight tines at the top, is called the Shin shape, and this shape doesn't really have a name. So these are called Shin Kazuo Chasen, and these are called Kazuo Chasen. These often get called a Shin for short. When it comes to using them, is there really a difference between the two? Not really, because by the time you actually prepare these for use, which I will talk about very shortly, this final curling will slightly loosen and these inner tines will separate and it'll look a little similar to this, but not quite. It's personal preference which one you go for. Generally speaking, the non-Shin variety of Kazuo Chasen are a little bit cheaper, but these are a little prettier, if you ask me. Of course, these are just the most popular styles and shapes of Chasen. There are probably about 100 out there. Each tea ceremony school in Japan has different ones for their usucha and koicha. There are different ones for different shaped tea bowls. They're all relatively niche unless you practice the school of tea. I do have one other style of Chasen with me today, and that's this long-handled Chasen made by Yasaburo Tanimura of Suika-en. I find these to be particularly useful if you have a tsutsuchawan, or a tall tea bowl, or if you want to whisk in a mug or other tall cylindrical-shaped object. A little specialty, but they're quite fun, and sometimes very useful. I've briefly touched on this topic before, but here we can compare 2 Chasen of the same style, one made in China and one made in Japan. One of the first things you'll notice if you handle both of these is that the Japanese Chasen is generally going to be a little bit lighter, and that's because there is more time and effort paid to shaving off extra material from the tines to make sure they're all nice and springy. And you can see this as well. If I poke these tines, you can see that they're actually a little stiff and don't bend very easily. Whereas if I do that to these tines, they are much, much softer and bouncy. Now, if you've never seen a brand new Japanese tea whisk before, they usually come in a paper box. The plastic cylinders that Chinese whisks come in are also available in Japan, but this is more traditional. As you can read on the box, if you can read Japanese, this is a Shin Chasen made in Japan by Kubo-sabun of Chikumedo. Chasen that come in paper boxes are glued to the bottom of the box, so you sort of have to pull it out and try and twist it at the same time. There we go. It's a bit messy. You're going to have glue and paper stuck to the bottom of your whisk. And that brings us to the next step, taking this off. To remove the glue and paper at the bottom of the chasen, you'll need some sort of plate or shallow dish and some water, just a little bit of water. And you simply place it in the water and wait. So this whisk has been soaking for about 5 minutes now, so it's time to take it out of the water. And using your nail or fingertips, you can sort of scrape away the paper and the glue, and it should just fall right off. Once you've gotten all of the glue and paper off, you can take a paper towel or a cloth and make sure it's nice and dry before setting it down. And now your chasen is almost ready to use. If you were going to do a tea ceremony, you could take it in this state, because the next step is something called chasen toji, or the wetting and softening of the bamboo whisk in hot water. To do this, you'll need a chawan. This is a Kohiki chawan by Kengo Sugawara, but any bowl would work, and some hot water. The temperature of the water doesn't really matter. It can be anywhere from like 80 degrees Celsius to boiling, as long as it's hot. And you simply take the chasen, put it in the hot water, and give it a little swish. The main purpose of this is that the hot water will soften the tines of the bamboo whisk, making them more flexible. That way when you go to actually whisk your tea, they're less likely to snap off and break. It also does the job of purifying the bamboo whisk. Hot water actually will take off a lot of the dust and make sure it's nice and clean, because you don't want any of that dust in your tea. Each tea ceremony school has their own version of chasen toji, and if you don't practice any of them, you can really just swish the whisk around in water for a bit. As you can see, the tines have begun to open up, and they are nice and soft and pliable and ready for whisking. As you may have noticed, many of the chasen featured in this video have some broken tines or a little dirty and worse for wear. Some of this is regular wear and tear, and some of this is a bit of negligent care. So how to take care of your chasen and how to clean it and shape it properly will be the subject of a future video. Hope you enjoyed this video or learned something new. If you have any questions or ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments down below. If you did enjoy it, please give us a like and subscribe. As always, I'll leave links to the chasen featured in the video in the description, as well as a link to my written blog post on chasen. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice day.